Welcome, fellow tacticians, finally, to the Imperial Tier List. Now, before we begin, I'd like to cover the intent and the disclaimers. Starting with the intent is that characters are going to be ranked in terms of general use. The idea is that with limited resources, you can prioritize your characters according to this list. The idea is definitely to target newer players coming to the game, maybe people in the middle stages of developing their rosters, and kind of give you an idea of what characters have good value in the game, and if you should prioritize them or not, and kind of in what order we would prioritize them if we had everything. Everything is going to be considered. Campaigns, guild raids, tournament arenas, normal arenas, onslaught, legendary release events, etc. Now, a quick disclaimer before we get into the rest of the disclaimers is that we do actually put a little bit more weight onto guild raids. Myself and the team that constructed this tier list, obviously being, top tier raiders, definitely value that game mode a lot more. We think it's the penultimate game mode and feel the other game modes just kind of fall short in terms of playability and also rewards. It's kind of a sentiment that's shared across the community, we feel. Now, let's head into a couple disclaimers. Once again, just like the Chaos tier list, this is a living list. Fortunately, with access to the test account, I could go in and make sure that I am more aware of what characters are going to be strong, and we have actually completely removed the testing tier, which you will see later. Now, it is a living list. If there are any changes, we will do our best to update you once we are certain of any new information. New characters coming out, maybe bouncing, that we'll talk about in this video since Commissar Yarrick just got his passive reworked-ish a little bit. So definitely all things that are going to be brought into consideration. Another two things that I want to talk about, one here and then we'll transition to the next slide, is one, I'm doing this video a little bit different in terms of production. Obviously we have the new equipment with the green screen. Obviously you can't see it, but the fact that you can't see my background means it's there. New mic, lighting, camera, etc., etc., etc. So, yay. However, my editor was just recently in a car accident, so he will not be able to really have the time to put this together, so I'm kind of doing everything in a one-shot approach. Hopefully it works, and hopefully I don't stumble too much, and it's not too yanky-janky. Another disclaimer is that when constructing the list and reviewing the list when I put the video together, I feel like the tier system that we had previously didn't really do the faction justice. I think we needed another tier in here to really separate some things out, but we'll go ahead and go over the tiers that we currently have. Top tier. Character is undeniably strong in multiple aspects or dominates one specific category massively. Now, this is really where I feel we missed the mark and should have delineated between multiple aspects and dominating one category specifically, but we'll talk about that as we move through this tier list. Strong. Character performs strongly in at least one category, but other characters may do the job better. Average. Character is beneficial to have, but is not worth heavy priority. Weak. Character is mediocre and has limited uses. Pass. Character should not be upgraded unless you really love it. Now, the pass tier is going to be a little bit of a point of contention, just based on the previous tier list that everybody else has constructed per the contest. Now, a quick talking point about that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your contest entries. This was so much more fun to do than the previous drop a comment and I'll pick a number. That kind of, yes, RNG, it gave everybody a fair chance, but it really wasn't fun for me, and I don't know if it was fun for you. Two things. One, we have selected the winners. I'm not going to mention them in this video. We'll go ahead and message you on Discord and go ahead and toss that out. For anybody that was completely unaware that there was a contest, we did post a video earlier kind of stating the rules for it. If you're not subscribed or you just don't get notifications or you didn't see where I post the link to the video, I'm sorry you missed it. Stay tuned for the next one. There will be another giveaway with the Xenos tier list. Promise. But, hold on, there's still more. We are participating in the Halloween event kind of puzzle going on. So we did get 2 letters selected, and we'll reveal those later. And you get a chance to have some fun with the anagram and see if you can figure it out. So stay tuned, or, as always, just hop to the timestamp if you feel like it. But, with all of that being said, A lot of caveats, a lot of disclaimers. We're already 6 minutes into this video. Let's go ahead and hop into our first character, shall we? And yes, we are still doing it Spinning Wheel of Death style, and we have Castellan Creed to start off the tier list. So, like before, we're going to talk a little bit about the character and all the different traits and things that he has going for him. Then we'll move forward and we'll place him. We're not going to spend too much time reviewing traits and kind of some things that you've seen before. However, if it's kind of a big noticeable thing, we'll go ahead and talk about it quite heavily up front. But Castellan Creed is the legendary character for the Astra Militarum. He has no traits, which makes the first one really easy. He has a lot of health, good damage, but his pierce ratio and a melee attack only is kind of underwhelming. Where he really shines, though, is with his Supreme Commander trait. He summons up to, I believe it's 2 Cadian Guardsmen. I'm sorry for a little bit of missing context there in the ability. In free adjacent hexes. And all friendly Cadian Guardsmen within hexes adjacent to him then immediately take a turn. Now, Cadian Guardsmen are also the Yarrick summon ability as well, so there's a lot of synergy there, and we'll talk about that. Now, his passive ability is very strong for different game modes as well. Whenever he is first targeted in battle, he will actually summon Sergeant Kell in a free adjacent hex. Anytime Creed is attacked, Kell switches places with him, essentially, and takes the damage instead, if they are adjacent to each other. So very similar to Celestine, except they kind of do like a little swap-a-roo, and that kind of changes a little bit of the flavor for it, but it is definitely a very strong passive. Now, everything that you're seeing here was pulled from the IVS bot, and we'll plug IVS later, and everything is at Diamond 2, level 50, completely maxed out, rarity, everything. So I wanted to kind of highlight these characters in their purest form, and once again caveat that we do not rank them necessarily on the height of their abilities. We rank them more so on kind of what's realistic, what you're going to be kind of, working towards, and what you should work towards. Now, with that being said, we feel Castellan Creed comes in at the strong tier. I've already mentioned his strong synergy with Yarrick makes him a great use for primes and campaigns, and he has a nice survivable passive for PvP. One area that he really excels is for the primes that have the boss adjutant trait. With getting a whole bunch of guardsmen onto the board, he is able to really kind of take over and apply a lot of hits in tandem with Yarrick. Overall, he has 3 summons if you count Color Sergeant Kell. One thing that I should do in the future is also link the summons for different characters in here as well. It's definitely something that we're considering doing in the future. If you think that gives value, please let me know. Now, Castellan Creed was one of those where a lot of people said strong. Some people actually talked about moving him to the average tier. I could kind of see why you'd want to move him down. He relies on Yarrick, and without Yarrick, he's definitely averaged, maybe even weak, to be honest with you. But his synergy with Yarrick really brings him up. It is important to foot stomp that. Don't think of him as a great character on his own. He has uses. He's decent in PvP, but not as a standalone character so much. And he kind of gets outclassed by other characters that can kind of do his job better, whether they provide their own summons, whether they're able to do independent damage. So, something to keep in mind, but Castellan Creed does slot currently into the strong tier. Back to the Wheel of Death. And we have Bellator. So, Sergeant Bellator is going to be the first of our Ultramarines, and one of my favorite characters, and it's pretty clear why. First off, he has flying, which is pretty obvious, but for the first time in the tier list series, we're actually seeing the Mark X Gravis, or Mark 10 Gravis. Any incoming damage has to go through armor a second time, which does not apply to crits. This is absolutely massive, and every character that has this trait instantly is very valuable, just because they are so damn hard to kill. Most cases in PvP, you're not really seeing anything exceed 35% crit, with exceptions being Calandus, anybody that wants to run Athana, or any sisters coming onto the battlefield with active faith. Now, his melee attack is bolter damage, which is kind of lackluster, and hits for 6 times, which is nice, meaning he already has instant synergy with our favorite space wizard, Eldrion. Now, what really sets Bellator apart from anybody else with just 6 attacks in melee is the fact that he summons a whole buttload of Inceptors. For each turn that goes by, he summons an additional Inceptor, who have insane damage values. They actually overtake Bellator. 1,000 bolter damage times 6, and you can summon up to, I believe, 7? Depending on the battle, depending on how big your enemy is, right? So there's definitely a lot of potential there. Actually, I think it might go up to 8 for guild raids. Neither here nor there. His Inceptors are massively strong on their own. They do 6 hits, which is fantastic, synergizes very well with Eldryon. And then you also couple that in with his passive Shock Assault, which means that he can stand next to his Inceptors, attack, and then they attack again, once again applying Doom. Now, an important caveat for anybody that doesn't know is Death from Above counts as an ability, and only the Inceptors attack, not individual attacks from them on the first turn that they are summoned, apply Doom. So the first time that you drop them, you're not getting 6 times 6 Doom. You're getting 6 times 1 Doom, depending on how many Inceptors that you summon. So something to keep in mind. But with all that being said, his amazing synergy with Eldryon puts him clear and far above every other character in the tier list. He is just fantastic, top of the top. Best guild raid summoner, he is useful for 4 out of the 5 bosses, super durable due to his Gravis armor, and pretty much anywhere that you want to bring him, you can, with the exception of Mortarion, because Mortarion shreds bosses. Yes, even for the Screamer Killer, who absolutely eviscerates summons, you can still take the Ghazghkull approach, drop his summons on the last turn, as showcased in my Screamer Killer video, to great success. Something definitely to keep in mind. He also is great for tanking the Screamer Killer as well. So all in all, Bellator, just a fantastic character. Now, without Eldryon, I feel he would drop down into the strong category probably. Maybe some could make the argument for average. I don't think so. He is campaign required. He not the greatest for PvP, but he is really annoying to deal with for PvP. The Inceptors are really hard to kill. So all in all, Bellator is a great character for sure. Back to the wheel. All right. Who do we have next? Okay. We're getting to the first of our Black Templars, and we have Sword Brother Godswyl. He has a trait, it's parry, it's the first time that we're seeing it, and this unit reduces incoming melee multi-hit effects by 1 to a minimum of 1, which, cool if he's face tanking people, sweet. But he has a power hit of 1. Granted, it hits hard. He's got good health and armor values, but let's take a look at his abilities, shall we? We have Thunderous Assault, which deals X power damage and pushes the enemy 1 hex backwards, and then he moves forward. Cool. And his crits deal an additional, 1,000 damage at max rank, and reduce the target's defensive by, 1,000 armor at max rank. Cool. He has a bolter and a crit booster, so 40% crit, not terrible for his passive, but it's still a 40% chance, a lot of RNG. Bosses are immune to armor reduction, so okay. And by the time that you're able to ramp up that armor, it's whatever. So I'm pretty sure you can kind of guess where I'm going to place him just based on that. And I honestly feel he falls into the weak category. He's 1-hit melee only and underwhelming abilities. And honestly, if he wasn't a campaign-required character, he would probably be in the pass tier, to be honest with you. Let's keep going. Alright, who do we have? Alright, another Black Templar. And we have High Marshal Helbrecht. This character's awesome. We see parry coming in for the second time. It's pretty big staple for the Black Templars. And then we also see that he's a 6-hit melee and a 3-hit bolter. Now, his abilities are where he really shines. Not so much the active. The active is nice. All friendly units within hexes, it's 2 hexes, I believe, now deal 500 damage, and this is at max rank, and gain pierce ratio in melee, regardless of damage type. Now, an important distinction that not very clear when you read this ability, whether here or in-game, is that the base damage is applied to ranged attacks as well as melee attacks, but only the pierce ratio is applied to melee, so something that's not very clear and had to test that one out to find out. Now his passive is what is really cool. He gains +1 movement when there's an enemy psyker on the battlefield, and this unit and friendly adjacent units deal 1500 damage at max rank in melee against psykers. It's absolutely huge. And with that being said, he slots in currently at the top of the strong tier. Now, first time that we're seeing this for this video, I do want to highlight that if the character is to the farthest left, then they are at the top of that tier. So Helbrecht is more valuable, in my opinion, than Creed. We could have also done a top-down approach. There was some options there to play with it, but he's strong, and he's stronger than Creed. So keep that in mind as we go throughout this list. Now, he's a great anti-psyker buffer, and he's one of the only characters to really do that for friendly units. With solid solo strength, he gets the bonus for himself, which is something that you don't see for the likes of other characters like Sibyll Devine or Athana. However, the melee buff only ruled him out of the top tier, so he can't be brought to Mortarion because Mortarion would murder him. Even for Gold 3 on L1 Nids, he's kind of squishy as well. We didn't really talk too much about the tank stats there. He's got good armor, but, I brought him in Gold 1 and he had a rough time. He's great for Hive Tyrant. He's great for Tervagon. He's great for the Norothrop. Honestly, he's probably one of the best characters, if not the best character, sans say Eldraun, of course, to bring to Hive Tyrant and Tervagon. So, definitely a great character, great for anti-psykers. If you get him, awesome, have fun with him. Bump him up, but he definitely doesn't really cut into one of those top priorities. I took him all the way up to Gold 3, was super happy, and then had to put him on pause whenever Diamond 2 came out, because, boom, all of a sudden everybody else took bigger priorities, so unfortunate there, but it is what it is. Let's continue. Alright, speaking of anti-psykers, we're bringing in Roswitha Esther, first of the Adeptus Sororitas sisters. She has Active Faith. Now, this unit gets 10% crit chance and increases her crit damage by 25% each time a friendly Imperial unit dies or kills an enemy unit. Once this unit or a friendly unit with Active Faith crit, this bonus resets. Now, this ability is really cool. This trait is really cool. But let's take a quick look at the active and passives real quick. The active. It deals X amount of damage to a target enemy within range and sets the hex on fire. Then it deals X amount of damage versus demons instead. So I believe it's 3 versus 6 there. So, I'm sorry, 2 versus 4. So 2 times that number and then 4 times that number if it's a demon. All demons within that hex take 60% additional damage. Now, immune demons only take 20% extra damage, and that's kind of more the number that we care about because Mortarion is an immune demon. Then her passive, Condemner's Strike, deals 3,000 at max rank extra damage against psykers. So her plus Helbrecht, you're absolutely wrecking somebody's face. And we feel that that puts her in top tier. Now, there was arguments to move her down to strong because she's kind of niche in some of the areas that she wants to perform in, but she's the best versatile anti-psyker. And what I mean by that is not only is she a melee anti-psyker, but she's also a ranged anti-psyker. So she can be brought to Mortarion. She can be brought to the Norothrop, however the Norothrop has, the melee considerations, but she still hits like a truck in melee. She actually hits harder in melee because it's 3 hits versus 2. Hive Tyrant, Tervagon, and obviously Mortarion, she's the best damage dealer. She's decent for PvP, although not ideal, and she has decent synergies, I say minor though, with Ahriman, because she's able to set stuff on fire, but she's only able to do it once, right? You could definitely bring Ahriman, her, into Mortarion and get a lot of damage out, because she amps the damage, he amps the damage. There's a lot of damage amp going on there, it's really fun. And you bring the Norothrop in, have a great time. Now, another thing that's really cool, if you don't know, with the Adeptus Sororitas sisters, their ramping crit passive is really nice. It actually adds a lot of value to knives, despite them being multi-hitters. If you're able to ramp that passive up, that trait up, then you're able to bring a knife and get even more damage. Another thing, too, is for salvage runs, you can bring an Adeptus Sororitas sister. Literally don't have them do anything. Last turn, you're able to just one-shot the strong box, guaranteed crit every time. So, super satisfying there. Moving on. We got a lot of characters to go, and I'm already 20 minutes in, so I apologize. And we're getting the legendary of the Adeptus Sororitas sisters. Now, Celestine, the Living Saint. Act of Faith, flying, we see him again. Now, we take a look at her melee only, 3 hits, decent, and not great health, decent-ish armor. Her active ability is awesome. From the second round, may move to any hex adjacent to any enemy unit and attack that enemy in melee, dealing plus extra damage during her normal attack. That's pretty damn strong. That means she has global reach to get into anybody's face. So if you're hiding a squishy in the background, well, it's not going to end well for that squishy. And then she has Gemini Superior. When attacked, summons a Gemini in a free adjacent hex and immediately triggers the passive ability Life Wards. Can do this twice per battle. Life Ward essentially means that any damage applied to her will actually get passed off onto the Gemini. Meaning, you can't one-shot Celestine unless you back her into a corner where she has no room to summon her Gemini. So that means you summon a Ravos onto the battlefield, and you pop Overwatch. Celestine can just walk in there, lose one of her Gemini, still have another one in her pocket, and say, okay, dude, whatever. She can absolutely dominate Tournament Arena. To the point that we actually decided to put her in the top tier. She is the best PvP character in the game, hands down. She has global reach on the active and extreme survivability with the passive. Now, we're talking a lot about her ability to dominate PvP. Number 1 character in Tournament Arena, if you played the game mode, you played against a Celestine, you probably had a bad time. Now, something to also note is that she's not bad in other game modes either. She's really good in campaigns because of the survivability of her passive. She's good for Onslaught. She's good for character quests whenever you're able to use her because she doesn't take damage unless you kill all of her Gemini. She's just all around pretty decent, and we've actually seen some people take her instead of Aleph Null. Now, granted, not to better effect, but it's passable for guild rates. And specifically Mortarion. So it's decent. She excels in other categories at an average to strong level, but definitely in Tournament Arena and PvP, she just raises the bar completely. And yeah, single-handedly, just based on that fact, goes into the top tier. Let's continue on. Man, 3 sisters in a row. Jeez, alright. Morvenn Vahl. The second legendary for the Adeptus Sororitas, and unfortunately only acquirable through requisitions. She has Active Faith, Big Target, Explodes, and Mechanical. So for the first times we're seeing Explode and Mechanical. We've seen Big Target before, but not in this video. Essentially due to her size, she can't get knocked back. She can't gain bonuses from tall grass or trenches. But she can apply some kind of tanky stats, making range attacks do less damage to her friendly adjacent units. She's mechanical, that means she cannot be healed by Incisus, she cannot be healed by Isabella, however, she can be healed by Aleph Null and Give a Scrap, so yay, cool. She has 5 hits on her melee, and she has 3 hits on her ranged. She has a really fun active ability, actually, where she's able to deal X amount of blast damage to a target within 3 hexes, so she's got a decent amount of range, and her bolter is also range 3 as well. To all hexes adjacent to the target, with the exception of her own hex. So yes, friendly fire is possible. She also has Sweeping Blow when attacking an adjacent enemy. Any enemies adjacent, both to the target and the Morvenn Vahl, receive some power damage there. So definitely great for AoE. But with all that being said, she's got a fun active, she's got good range, and she can also nearly one-shot Corodius. But she's not really particularly best in any role. Now, for anybody curious about that, Corodius is the prime for Mortarion, and essentially the more of Mortarion Corodius' summons that you kill, Corodius himself takes extra damage, however, attacking Corodius directly isn't always the best. However, there's a lot of summons that you can kill, and we already talked about Act of Faith. So plus 10 crit chance, you keep increasing the crit damage, the crit chance, you get over 100%, then you start taking that crit damage percentage to the moon, take a knife, max out knife, and then you just poke Herodias. Yeah, I've seen her single-handedly hit the boss for about 140, 150,000 damage with one attack. It's pretty strong, pretty cool. Not worth the investment per se, and that's why we kind of feel she slots in there. She's fun to use, but definitely I don't think breaks into the strong tier. Just kind of wanted to pass on that tidbit of knowledge. Back to the wheel. Got quite a few more characters to go. Varro Tigurius. The face of the game for the longest time until they started changing around some of the icons for the Tyranids. But Varro Tigurius is second of our Ultramarines, and he is the first of our Imperial Psychers. He's got physical trait, which is, I guess, nice for some legendary release criteria. And then he's also got his ranged psychic attack. His active is kind of cool. It deals 1 physical damage to a unit within 2 hexes and then can chain up to 5 adjacent units. For anybody wanting to call me out and say it's only 4, oh, it's 5. It's just one of those skills that ramps up as you take it all the way up to legendary. His passive is kind of underwhelming. It's all friendly surrounding units have an added block with % chance to block. Okay, cool. Helps with campaign a little bit. And I don't think it's enough. I think it's cool. One AoE burst is pretty decent. Cool, he's a Psyker. Yay. Other than the fact that he's brought to campaign, he's got a weak passive, he's got okay-ish damage, and he's got 1 nice AoE. Where else are you bringing him? I mean, anywhere that he's required, sure, but there's other characters that do AoE better. There's other Psychers that do Psyker stuff better. And his passive is block. I think block is one of the most unfun things in the game. I hate trying to prioritize for it. And it's just overall pretty underwhelming as a whole. So back to the board we go. Let me go ahead and move this real quick. All right. Marneus Calgar, who is the subject of the giveaway today. So, nice. Marneus Calgar. Mark 10 Gravis armor once again, and then we're seeing Final Vengeance. Whenever he loses his health, he immediately performs an attack on an eligible target, unless he's overkilled. Insane health and insane armor, especially since that armor needs to be shredded through 2 times. And then also, you have to deal with a % block chance, so damn, you're having a rough time. His Gauntlets of Ultramar ability is actually really cool. He deals 1 bolter damage to all enemies within 2 hexes and an additional hit against direct adjacent enemies. So you can definitely drop him in the middle of a party and just, power fist his way through and kind of ruin everybody's day. But his big thing is his Rites of Battle. Adjacent friendly units now deal X amount extra damage. That's 900 at max rank. Imperial units deal 1,300 extra damage instead. Massive. Absolutely massive. And it's because of that, he actually slots into number 2 of the top tier. He is fantastic for PvP. He is the best Imperial buffer, hands down. Super tanky. Great synergy with Bellator. If you park him next to 2 Inceptors, that means 12 attacks are now getting 1,200 extra damage per hit. Per 6 hits, so 12 times 1,200, damn, that's pretty big. And then Bellator, popping his passive, that's another 6 hits that go in. You can park him next to Malgan Ra, who is now hitting, 900 plus, or times 6. The damage potential is absolutely strong there. He's very tanky with Gravis, like we talked about, and he's just super annoying to deal with in PvP as well. Marneus Calgar, a phenomenal character indeed. And for those that won the contest, nice. Fun fact, for the first place winner, we actually got the prize bumped up from 150 to 250. So I wasn't able to bring up the other prizes. It's kind of what I wanted to do, leave the big one at 150, bring the others up to 75 or 100. But you take what you get. Back to the wheel. And we have the first Dark Angel out of 2, Sarquael. So Sark comes in as the first Dark Angel, like we said, and he has heavy weapon, meaning if he doesn't move, he gets the % damage increase. Beautiful. Lovely. He has 1 hit on his melee and 1 hit on his ranged, and he is one of our snipers. 3 ranged, Overwatch, heavy weapon, kind of deal. Now, his active is pretty cool. It deals plasma damage to a target within 3 hexes, and then kind of splashes that damage in adjacent hexes behind the target. So, kind of like if you're in a flying V pattern, you're going to have a bad day going up against him. Now, this also does an additional 35% pierce ratio. And until his next turn, any further hits that deal plasma damage against these units also deals 35% pierce ratio at max rank. Then his Grim Retribution. During each enemy turn, if there is no enemy adjacent to him, he shoots back at the first enemy within range that targeted himself or friendly Dark Angel, immediately after the enemy's attack. This shot counts as Overwatch and deals extra plasma damage, so yes, it could apply to a supercharge, so don't get hit by his active and then get hit by his passive, or you're going to have a really bad time. Now, I feel he slots in kind of at the tail end of average. And eventually I think he'll slot kind of middle ground average. He's a decent PvP Overwatch sniper, but we talked about the synergies there, right? His active has plasma synergy. His passive has Dark Angel synergy. Well, we've only got a few people with plasma damage, like Corodius, who are you bringing him? And then Azrael, who is just the character, right? And maybe a few others, but there's not really a lot of synergy for him. And I feel that really makes him fall short into a lot of his potential, which is unfortunate because I think he's a pretty well-designed character, and I'm really excited to see what the rest of the Dark Angel faction brings. Let's keep moving on. Alright, Sibyll Devine. Sibyll Devine is another member of the Astra Militarum, another Psyker. She has the same pretty much kind of line up in her stat line as Varro. Meh health, decent armor. Her active is pretty cool. It's very feast or famine. It can deal, a decent chunk of psychic damage to the target, and then it can have a chance to score another hit. I believe it's 75, 50, and 25 going down the line. Which means she can do a lot of damage on her active, but if it doesn't proc, the chain dies, and then you're kind of just left holding your sandwich going, oh, I'm having a bad time. Her passive is kind of where she really shines, though. All friendly units starting their turn adjacent to Sibyll Devine gain Infiltrate, which is nice, especially for PvP, and they take reduced damage, which is also pretty nice. It's a way for her to pass off tankiness. Now, one thing that is really unfortunate about this is that she doesn't get that herself. And why that's really unfortunate is because she is absolutely glass. She's a good infiltrate buffer, but she's extremely squishy. She is campaign required. Now, she's one of those characters that I probably could have put down in the weak tier as well, but a lot of people really value her infiltrate, and I could see it, especially with kind of how Tournament Arena has either been Summon meta or Overwatch meta recently, so there's a lot of value there. And then, obviously, campaign required. But if you've seen me do any of the campaigns, and you're about to see me do the campaign, I believe, whether I'm doing it tonight or tomorrow night, I'm not certain, it's pretty much protect the president, and Sibyll Devine's the president. Anybody comes near her, granted, yes, I get it, bloodletters smack psychers like a truck, but if anybody comes near her, she dies, and it makes life really hard. So you pretty much have to play the entire campaign around her surviving. And honestly, that was almost enough for me to put her in the weak tier, but I was overruled a little bit there, so. Let's go ahead and continue. Second and last Dark Angel coming in. Azrael is a really cool design character. He has Final Vengeance, Overwatch. He's got melee, 3 hits. He's got a plasma, 1 hit on his ranged. Decent stats, kind of coming in for him. Decent health, pretty good armor. Now, let's talk about his active, which I think is really freaking cool. It calls in a Ravenwing Dark Talon to deal direct damage, and a lot of it, to a target enemy within X hexes, and then deals bolter damage to all enemies in an uninterrupted straight line. So it's kind of like just a bombing carpet run, right? It's really cool. However, it cannot get elevation bonus, and it cannot crit, so a little bit of a negative there. Now let's take a look at his passive. Friendly units within hexes block an additional X damage, 800 at max rank, when they block and deal an extra whatever damage there when firing from Overwatch. Other friendly Dark Angels also get increased block chance. So, ultimately, I feel Azrael comes into the weak tier. I don't see where you'd ever want to bring him where you couldn't bring somebody else. Granted, he has Overwatch himself, which is nice. But his active ability, yes, cool. It spreads suppress, which can deny Overwatchers in PvP. Doesn't have any sort of use for guild raids. Doesn't have any sort of use for campaigns. Everything that he wants to do, I feel like Thad does better. Better range, global on his active ability for suppression. Granted, it doesn't do great direct damage, where that direct damage can just absolutely shred someone. Sure, granted, 100%. But where are you realistically going to be able to use it in a situation that you actually get the most value out of the suppression for it? If you have a character that you can hit with that ability in the front line, then they're probably not worth taking out anyway, unless you really want to deny a tank. So there's something to be said there. Granted, it's fun. I really like him. His biggest problem for me is the passive. Let's go back to that. And it's block damage increase. So you help people block extra damage. You help them get more Overwatch damage, but literally every Overwatch character has a heavy weapon for the most part, with the exception of him. So why not just bring Thad, who applies it within two hexes, and then also the second part, increasing their block chance. Well, there's only one other Dark Angel, so until more Dark Angels come out, until PvP really has a better spot in the game, weak. Which is unfortunate. I think he's a really cool character, and I'm excited to see who the legendary Dark Angel will be. Speaking of overwatching snipers, we've got ourselves Certus. One of the characters that you're given very early in the game, I believe number 2. Certus comes in with Overwatch, Heavy Weapon, and Infiltrate. Does not trigger Overwatch. He's got 1 hit on the bolter, 1 hit on the melee, and it does some pretty heavy damage. And especially if, you have the Heavy Weapon trait coming in here for you. Now let's take a look at his active ability. You are able to fire a shot and then push a target back 1 hex. Now the Heavy Weapon trait applies double to this ability. That was actually really cool for a time there when certain primes weren't big target and they could be displaced. I think they can still be displaced, however the effect was that when they got displaced into a wall or another unit, then they took percent damage, which was massive. He was doing incredible damage on those primes. That was since nerfed, unfortunately, so he lost a lot of value there. And then whenever an incoming attack has its number of hits reduced for any reason, it deals 500 damage less per hit to this unit. So if he stands in tall grass and they have their hit reduced, yay. It kind of really the only big use that I can think of. Or if he's standing next to a big target, he can have his hits reduced if he's hit by a ranged attack. One thing that I forgot to mention on his Mortis round is that the Heavy Weapon trait applies double to this ability, so instead of doing 25%, it's a 50% increase, which, that's pretty nice. But all this being said, I feel like he swaps into average, and once again, probably could have gone into the weak tier. He's a decent sniper. Overwatch is good for PvP, sure. He's campaign required, and his passive kind of sucks. Honestly, everything that he does, I feel Sark does better. Just pure damage output. Sniper, now granted, Certus has, I think, more damage on his actual ranged attack. However, Sark has a better Pierce ratio, so take that how you will. a much better Pierce ratio, actually. It's Bolter versus Plasma, which I think is 35% for, or I'm sorry, 20% versus like 35%. Let's go back and verify that real quick. Yeah, 65% versus 20%. So, yeah, that's pretty big difference. He's required for campaign, so yeah, and he does decent in the campaign. He's not like, Miss Protect the President, Sibyll Devine. And I mean, Varro kind of does decent for the campaign as well, but meh use in PvP. I think Certus kind of slots well into an early player's conquest wins. He was actually pretty big for my ult account in Tournament Arena, so some value there for sure. But once again, argument could be made to actually demote him for sure. And I will take a second to really caveat, this is opinionated, right? This is a collection of people sitting down and going, yeah, but I feel like he's not really good here, and he does this. And you're like, oh, okay, cool, move him up. And then somebody else is like, let's move him down. And you're like, why? And you go, oh, that's a good point. So it's a lot of back and forth, give and take. It's not perfect. It's just me and some other people's opinions, and hopefully giving you a little bit of insight as to our thoughts on them, and that can help you with some of your decision making. But I don't think this one's going to be too controversial in sizes. Apothecary Incisus, I believe the 4th character that you get. So Bellator, Certus, Vindicta, and then you get Incisus, and you're like, cool, I got a healer. And he looks cool. I mean, that white armor coming in looks pretty awesome. He's a healer with a one-hit melee attack, which is 30-43. Now, important thing to note. Healing is based on the healer's damage multiply the highest number of hits on their weapons. So it's 1 times 3-4-8-3. It's meh. His active ability is an AoE heal. His passive ability is a percent chance to revive somebody and then bring them back up to a certain amount of health, unless they're overkilled. Cool. Very similar to Rotbone in that regard, right? Pass. Big pass. He's outclassed in every single regard. He's got no traits. His only really redeeming quality is that if you don't have a healer and you need one, cool. Use him, I guess. Other characters, literally every other healer does his job better. And he's got piercing if you need to bring him for a legendary release event. That's about it. Alright, moving on. No need to beat the dead horse. Arjac. Alright, so we've got the first of our Space Wolves, I believe. He's got Resilient. First time we're seeing this, I believe, and anytime he would take lethal damage, unless he's overkill, he doesn't die, he just stays at 1 damage, or 1 health. Deep Strike, he can go anywhere with the exception of power-up nodes and Tournament Arena, and not adjacent to any enemy unit, and he's got Terminator armor. And you take a look at his stat line right here, 8,500 health at max rank, or 8,400, and 2k armor. He's very tanky. His active is actually really cool. Attack target unit within range for X amount of damage, and the target is stunned. And I believe it's the first time we've seen stun. They can't use any abilities, they deal less damage, and they have their movement reduced. And for each character that has been defeated in the battle, this ability deals a lot of extra damage. Now, character. Character are your own characters or like big named NPCs, not your run-of-the-mill bloodletter, not your run-of-the-mill summon, not your run-of-the-mill whatever, right? It has to be a character. Then his Anvil Shield. He'll block an additional X amount of damage, and when he blocks, he covers the attacker's hex and ice. If he is below % health or his attacker is on a hex covered in ice, he gains additional block. Pretty cool, especially if you see in the All, there's going to be a lot of ice on the battlefield. Maybe this could change things here in the future for him. And his blocks stun any melee attacker until the attacker's next turn, which is also pretty cool, right? Another PvP character, yay. But we don't really value PvP that much, aside from like the characters that absolutely dominate it. I feel he really falls into the weak tier. I think he is great for Conquest TA. And I think his full hammer hits like an absolute truck, but it requires you to kill other units first, which might not happen. I have seen him really dominate just standing on one of the capture spires and just stand there and block a whole bunch and deal damage out. He is very tanky. The foe hammer has one-shot me twice. There's arguments to be made to move him up to average, but I just don't think him dominating just Conquest TA, and not even dominating, he just does pretty good in that mode, might be an argument to move him up to average, but I just didn't feel like it was enough, and neither did the rest of the team. Cool character, though. Really cool character. And I would love to see tanks have their day, right? But a lot of it's just fast burst, get a much damage out, and win, right? And, you know, he could be good for legendary release events as well, but he's only got power. Granted, he's melee only, and that has some play to it too. So, meh. Meh. Alright. Alright. Ancient Thoread. Okay. Well, you take a look at him. Final Vengeance and Parry. Pretty staple across the Black Templars. Now, his melee is 2 hits for power damage. Okay. Great health there for him coming in. Above average-ish armor. Let's take a look at his abilities. Aurelian Shroud. Adjacent friendly units have an added block with 22% block chance, and that's at max rank, plus 19%, and that's at max rank, for each round that is started, to block X amount of damage this turn and in the following enemy turn. So, you can give your team a one-time get-out-of-jail-free card. Nice. Cool. Astartes Banner. All friendly units within hexes ignore their battle fatigue trait, which really is only a couple summon units. Okay? Unless they already have it. So, it can't help them later. And count as having the trait Final Vengeance. So if they die, they get to get one last hurrah out. Yay. With final attacks dealing X amount of damage. Cool. No. Not enough. Not nearly enough. I don't value block. We've already talked about it. Granted, it was a very nice block chance. Granted, really well. It was a one-turn get-out-of-jail-free card. But it's one turn of survivability usefulness. Very underwhelming passive. Like, hey, cool guys, if you're about to die, go ahead and hit the enemy one last time. Yay. No. And, for Yarrick summons, like, they can resist their battle fatigue. Cool. Not enough. Campaign is his only value, and that is literally the only thing preventing him from being in the pass tier. Only thing. I can't say, hey guys, pass this character up completely, because he is required to get through a campaign. That is literally it. So, not going to beat that dead horse anymore either. Trying to make good time. Alright. Brother Kenrick Jaegar. Going through the Black Templars here. Oh, I have no idea where all of his stuff went. That is unfortunate. But let's talk about him anyway. So, he falls into the pass tier. Now, why is he pass and the other Black Templars who are arguably better in weak? Well, it's because he's not required for campaign. He's honestly not required for anything. Now, I will hopefully be able to patch this up and put over a screen here, or maybe even find out where things have gone, but essentially, his passive scaling is absolutely dreadful. His active allows him to taunt somebody, and then they duel a little bit. Cool, for one turn. He gets to have a melee face-off with somebody. Sweet. His stats are decent. But his passive is really where he falls short. The whole premise of his passive is that if you attack him, he attacks you first and deals X amount of damage. But the scaling at max rank is absolutely abysmal. Like, at any on-level content, mind you, I'm talking about like level 50 ability, he's not one-shotting almost anything at equal content, right? You go into like round 7 or 8 of LRE, and he's still not one-shotting shit. Like, it is absolutely dreadful. And that ruins the only thing that I think he could have been good for. I wish I would have been able to show you. Maybe I'll just pull it up and overrule myself. But, yeah, Kenrick Jaegar, pass. Hard pass. Now let's keep pressing. All right. Brother Burchard. or Burchard. Burchard? I don't know. Alright. Anyway, we got another Black Templar coming in. And so far, with the exception of Helbrecht, they've all been pretty shit. But he's got Mark 10 Gravis, and he's got Suppressive Fire, which is pretty damn nice in my opinion. Decent melee, decent ranged, and for some reason his actual stat lines were cut off for his damage profile and tank profile. But let's take a look at his abilities. Deals up to X amount of damage to a target within X hexes, and any leftover hits any enemy unit within hexes, prioritizing kills. So it's a smart kind of grenade launcher. Like, that is, it's awesome to use. It's very satisfying. Then enemies adjacent to a target of other Richard's ranged attacks have a % chance to take bolter damage as long as they are not obscured. So he's got AoE. Where do we feel that places him? In the strong tier. He has a Gravis Armor AoE badass. Synergizes great with Isabella to dominate Legendary Release event. He is also campaign required, and unlike his two companions, he actually provides something to the campaign. He's also got Suppressive Fire, which reduces other damage. So Mark 10 Gravis, AoE, Isabella, like, he's just really tanky, really satisfying to use, and definitely, if you have him and you're struggling with some LREs, boost him up. It can help. And also, helps with the campaign and the way things have been going. Wouldn't be surprised if we see the Elite campaign come out for the Black Templars. Who knows? Gods, I hope not, because I don't want to invest in the Thoread or Godswyl. Ulf. This character's pretty cool. So, I now have a black background. That's something I forgot to delete out as well. I am sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just making all sorts of mistakes. But he's got Final Vengeance, and he's got Unstoppable for our first Space Wolf here. Now, Unstoppable essentially means that fire doesn't stop him, razor wire doesn't stop him, broken ice doesn't stop him. All these things do not stop his movement. However, he will still take increased damage if he's on razor wire, so keep that in mind. Now, we have decent health, decent armor coming in. He's a melee only, which makes sense for things later down the line. Now, his Great Frost Axe. Attack an enemy unit in melee for a decent amount of piercing damage, which is awesome because he can be used for piercing LRE. Yay. And cover the hex the enemy stands on in all adjacent hexes in ice. The crit damage bonus of the ice is already applied for the attack. So, if you're not familiar, ice just increases the amount of crit damage that an enemy takes. However, bosses are immune to it because they don't take hex effects anymore. Which makes sense because before you would bait somebody like Silent King onto Razor Wire and you deal a whole bunch of extra damage. They were like, no, can't happen anymore. But then ice comes around and you're like, I would really like it to work here because my characters can actually apply it and it's part of their kit. And they're like, nah. So, change please. I would like that. That would be nice. Savage Killer. The creme de la creme for Ulf. When a summon moves to or is summoned adjacent to Ulf, he immediately just absolutely blasts them. Ulf will also perform the ability against any enemy that attempts to use an active ability when in a hex adjacent to him. In that case, he deals his damage before that unit's ability is active. So if you're Aleph Null, and you come up to him and you go, Scarabs, he's just, no. You don't even get the Scarabs out. He's just, no, not going to happen. Right? You come up to him and you want to use, like, any sort of melee ability, he just denies it. It's super strong. And with that being said, I feel he comes in at the strong tier. Some people could make an argument and say, hey, maybe top tier. But literally for the reasons that he is the best anti-summoner and anti-ability character in the game. Like, any summoner or summon runs near him, he just instantly plays Ulf Whack-A-Mole. It's beautiful. Beautiful to watch. He is the #1 character for Corodius, the Prime. You literally just place him there, all of his summons will run at Ulf, and Ulf just starts whacking them one by one, and then Corodius is just like taking a whole bunch of damage, just getting blasted. Now, please, if you're bringing Ulf to Corodius, know that the initial units in the battlefield are not summons. I see too many people make this mistake. They're like, he came at me and the Ulf passive didn't work. It's because it wasn't a summon. The units that are already there are not summons. Please. However, not just good for Corrodius. Gaz summons the Storm Boys that come in. He can smack all those in. The Death Marks that come in, granted, you shouldn't bring him for SK, or Silent King, sorry, because the summons are ranged and they shouldn't get within range of you anyway. But yes, theoretically, he would one-shot those as well, pretty much, depending on the level of the passive. So ultimately, Ulf is a very strong character, in my opinion. Whew, we are blasting, boys. We've got 5 more to go. I know people were mad that I spent an hour on 15 Chaos characters trying to get this out, but still not cut back on the information that I'm giving you. Alright, cool. Everything's fixed. We're good. I no longer have a fancy, funny background, and we have our stats, so we are money. Vindicta is coming in as another sister with active faith and heavy weapon. Her flame damage is awesome here. She's got good health and dog shit armor, if we're being honest. Sub 1k armor at max rank, that is pretty rough. However, her active ability essentially just allows her to attack twice, and her passive ability essentially applies AoE damage to all of her attacks. Friendly fire is live here. But let's go ahead and take a look. I feel she slots into the strong tier. She is the queen of fire AoE damage. Just fire damage in general, honestly. Synergies with Thad and Ahriman because she has heavy weapon. And Ahriman loves when hexes are on fire. She is great for the Winged Prime, who takes additional damage from fire and blast damage, which that's not really ample in the game right now. So definitely something to be said for that, for sure. Now, I always plug him in whenever I talk about anything to do with Vindicta, Mortarion, but one of our best damage dealers in Celestine Lions, rank 6, 7 guild, depending on which day you look at it, right? He runs Thad, Vindicta, Aleph, Eldrion, and I forget who else he runs to round that comp out. But he is blasting this boss for 280,000 damage on Legendary 4 with Vindicta. Oh, that's right, he brings Archimatos. And the reason he does that is he summons the Bloodletters. Then he has Vindicta barbecue them all. And then she gets active faith procs because she just killed all those units. And then she crits for high hell with a strong knife. So, a lot of potential there. And I think she's a really strong character, fun to use. You get her super early. Great synergies with Thad, who is, once again, a great character, and you'll find out here shortly. But, yeah, Vindicta, super strong. 4 characters to go. We're blazing through. Blazing. All right, Tjark. This character is really cool. He is another Space Wolf, and for the first time, we're seeing Terrifying. He takes 30% reduced damage from melee attacks. It's not the first time we've seen it. Malganral was the first to have it. His active is Grapnel Launcher, and it targets an enemy unit within X hexes and deals X amount of physical damage to it, and then pulled 1 hex towards Tjark. Essentially, it's essentially what you'd imagine. Throws, pulls, swap places. Now, granted, there's a lot of caveats there on how it can work and positioning. It's pretty cool to have a decent displacement. He deals X amount of extra damage against Psykers, which we're seeing a lot of anti-Psyker coming up in this video because the Imperials don't like Psykers. Makes sense. Enemy Psykers within 2 hexes deal X amount of damage less, and their smite ranged attacks will not cause an additional hit. 2 big things I want to tackle here. 1, anytime you see a character with physical damage, you immediately go, ooh, don't like that, because 1% pierce sucks, right? But that also means their base damage is incredibly high. 2,500 damage per attack is insane at max rank. And when Diamond 3 comes out, Tjark will be an absolute menace. And this is pretty much the staple across the board with anybody that has physical attacks. As the stat ratios get higher and higher and higher, the pierce starts mattering less and less and less, and their base damage starts mattering more and more and more. So, you can see a lot of intrinsic possibilities for him in the future. Now, where do we feel that this slots him? Well, there's one more important thing to talk about, is that his Hunters Beyond Death, the first part of it applies to bosses. The second part does not. Enemy Psykers within 2 hexes won't deal reduced damage to him if they're a boss because they have immune, and this will not apply to them. So with all that being said, I feel like he slides in at the tail end of strong. He's a strong anti-Psyker. He can be brought to the Tyranids. He can be brought to Mortarion, but I feel he's kind of outclassed by Roswitha, by Helbrecht. Now, you could run just a straight anti-Psyker lineup, and you could run Bellator, Calgar, Helbrecht, Roswitha, Tjark. Now, granted, you got to slide Eldreon in there somewhere, right? You gotta do Eldreon some justice. D2 raised his potential, but I don't think it was enough. I really think he needs Diamond 3 to really shine, to really get in there. I know a lot of people are like, no, dude, no Diamond 3. Granted, I hear you. I don't want it yet either. Give me some time with Diamond 2, please. And, another thing is his Infiltrate and Grapple are fun for PvP. But it's just super on the fence. He could honestly drop down to average, and I wouldn't feel too bad about doing it. A lot of potential there. A lot of potential for him. All right, what do we got? We have Kut Skoden. All right, big target. He is a big, beefy boy. Now, the problem that I have with Kut Skoden really lies in his passive ability, but we'll get there. Once again, you're seeing that physical powerhouse coming in. Diamond 2, Kut hits like an absolute monster truck. I'm not saying take Kut Skoden to Diamond 2. Not saying that whatsoever. I'm just saying there's potential. If you watch my Screamer Killer video, I took him in for funsies and had him solo tank the Screamer Killer. He was smacking harder than literally any other solo tank could hit. But that's about it for uses. His Frag Bomb is a decent blast damage AoE, but since he doesn't have blast damage on anything else, it's not like you really want to bring him to the Winged Prime. Avalanche of Muscle, he deals X amount of damage in melee if moved into contact with that enemy unit this turn. Here's where I really have an issue. There are two other characters with that same passive plus more. Angrax has that same passive, same damage too. And also he plays Angrax Whack-A-Mole. Death Leaper coming out does the exact same thing, except he also heals and suppresses. Give Kut some love. Everybody has a better Kut passive than Kut does. That's not cool, man. That's not cool. Ultimately, I feel he slots in an average, and honestly, his position here, it could kind of go anywhere in average. I'm not super hard set that he's above Morvenn Vahl. I'm not super set that he's below Tjark. You could make arguments that he's worse than Certus. Like, he could slide in anywhere. It depends on how much you actually want to put into him. He's campaign required. He's the strongest big target, technically, in the sense that, Diamond 2, he has a lot of potential. He has a satisfying active. Walking up and just blowing up his grenade is pretty cool. But his passive is dog shit. Like, come on, y'all. Come on. But, yeah, Kut. Average. 2 more characters to go. 2 more. Thaddeus Noble. We've already talked about him quite a bit. And that's because he's pretty important. He's got suppressive fire, and I believe he is the only character with indirect fire in the game. He can fire over obscuring hexes and hit targets in trenches. Pretty damn cool. That means he does not need to be next to somebody, or he can be kind of like hiding out below a hex where you can't hit him, but he can hit you kind of deal. Pretty satisfying. His melee attack coming in with lasers, 10% pierce, pretty dog shit. His ranged attack coming in 3 times blast damage. And if you look at that damage ratio at Diamond 2, hits like a fucking truck. Absolutely does. 3,000 damage times 3, that's 9k, unbuffed. Absolutely huge. Now, if he has not moved, he can then drop a barrage of shells on a target on the battlefield, dealing X amount of damage, and that's 2 times that. Randomly hit the target hex or surrounding hexes. Now, essentially, this means the more turns that go by, the more reliable his accuracy is, and that's kind of important to know, and it can hit all the way up to 10 times. So yes, you could do 3,000 damage times 10 onto one target. Now, it can't get any modifiers. It can't crit. Doesn't get Eldreon Doom, it doesn't get anything else like that, but still, that's 30,000 damage on his active ability if you wait till the end. Now, granted, it comes in at 15% pierce, so take that with a grain of salt, right? But now, his spotter ability comes in, and it's pretty strong too. It's 800 damage for anybody with a heavy weapon trait. That's pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. Now, I'm pretty sure you heard the amount of hype in my voice. Top tier character, 100%. 100%. There's arguments to be made that he's better than Calgar. I personally have unlocked Calgar recently. I think he's really fun. I think he's really great to use. I do not regret farming him whatsoever. But anyway, Thaddeus. He's a heavy weapon buffer, which the best damage dealer in the game, Malgan Ra, and haven't talked about them yet, and that's coming in the Xenos video, is a heavy weapon user. He has a global suppressive active. He's a range 3 hard hitter. He is the heaviest damage dealer by himself in a vacuum to Mortarion. Unless you talk about, like, ramping Norothrop up, or you talk about, buffing the ever-loving hell out of Malgan Ra, right? Like, yes, cool, of course, given all the tools, they'll do better. But by himself, he deals the most damage to Mortarion, right? Because Mortarion has Revoltingly Resilient, and he hits over 3, yada, yada, yada. Anywho. His value does drop off a little bit because he's not a 6-hitter, and also because he really gets the most out of buffing heavy weapon hitters. So if you don't have Vindicta in your lineup at a decent level, you don't have Malgan Ra at a decent level or unlocked at all, don't really invest in his passive too much, but that passive has a lot of value. Definitely a top tier character. Now moving into our last character. There's no wheel because there's one character left. She was a little harder to slot. Once again, our last sister coming in with Active Faith and Healer. She's melee only with a 3x bolter hit, and if we go back to Incisus all the way in our time machine, we remember that 3 times her damage is her heal, so she's already better healer than Incisus just based on base healing. Let's take a look at that active ability. Heals herself and all adjacent friendly units, so Incisus active, granted a scaled down version, pretty scaled down, but then revives a random friendly Imperial character and then up to 2 friendly Imperial summons that have been defeated in this battle. So Yarrick goes in, pops some guardsmen, they all die, you bring him back, like, boom, there you go, you've got him and his guardsmen back alive, like, that's awesome. Top that on with Anshi, and then boom, just got a summoning madhouse, right? Now, granted, that's not the most optimal combination for that, but, there's options. It's just a guaranteed revive versus a 90% chance to revive. Granted, 90%'s not bad, but you revive 3 people. Granted, it's only once. But her passive is absolutely amazing. Any adjacent friendly enemy or unit that takes damage, not just Imperial, and not just, the fleshies, right? It can be done for mechanicals. They're instantly healed for 1200 health. Like, that's max rank, granted, sure, but, like, you put her in a corner with some tanky boys around her, and they get hit, and they're just like, something happened, bro? Didn't feel shit. Like, cool, you dealt 600 damage to me? I healed for 1200. What you got? Nothing. Now, obviously, clearly, best healer in the game. Legendary release events, campaigns, onslaught, she comes in clutch with a guaranteed revival active. I felt that slotted her pretty strongly into top tier. Now, one thing that I will note is that I just think, I don't even know when Yarrick came into this list. Now I'm looking at it, but we'll talk about him. So yeah, Isabella, top tier healer, just absolutely amazing. Now the argument was to be made here, and with several of these characters, right? Do I create, like, top, right, where I put, Bellator, Calgar, and Thad, and then below it, like, the niche people, like Roswitha, Isabella, Celestine. So maybe we missed the mark there, for sure. And, yeah, that's something to kind of take a note at. Let's talk about Yarrick real quick, because I don't know where his slides went, and I apologize for that. But Yarrick is absolutely awesome. He is coming in with Resilient. He's got an active ability that summons up to 5 guardsmen, 2 to 5 depending on how the situation rolls. And then his passive was just actually recently reworked as well, which was awesome. Now, all of his guardsmen can get battle fatigue trait, and if they do, then they deal less damage. And if they retreat, he actually now kills one of them, and if you haven't seen it, dude, it looks real freaking cool. Like, they'll start running off, and then he just blasts them in the back of the head. It's super satisfying. Snow print. Nailed that one. That was awesome. But if one of them runs off and gets shot, now you've also got all of them getting an additional damage on top of that. So damage upon damage upon damage. It is super stellar. And also now with that change to his passive and him killing them instead of them running away, Act of Faith now gets an additional proc. You can see how that's all fantastic. Now these guardsmen hit like an absolute truck. 2 times, I believe, 3,000 at max rank. Could be 5 of them. You're looking at about 30,000 damage if all of them live and are happy. Sweet. Awesome. We have one guy in the guild on both of his accounts has Yarrick at rank 50, and he doesn't have any diamond characters whatsoever. He refuses diamond characters. And he's still outperforming more than half the guild with just Yarrick alone. He takes Yarrick to everything, and it works. Now, some negatives to take into consideration with Yarrick as well, and I wouldn't say enough of an argument to drop him down to the strong tier, just something to be cognizant of, right? For Yarrick to reach maximum potential, things need to go wrong. People need to die, so you can summon up to 5. Otherwise, it's just 2. And then also, people need to get battle fatigue before he can really get the most damage out of them. So some negatives coming into there, but definitely a very strong character, and if you have him, definitely worth the investment. He carried me well through the Indomitus campaign when I was a new player. And on my third account, the DZGJs, I did not have Yarrick, and it changed the game entirely for me. If you did not spend $5 on him, I'm sorry. If you're watching this before you're playing the game and you want to spend money on this game, buy Yarrick. Best investment in the game by far, 100%. Now, with that being said, let's close this out. A huge, huge thanks to IVS. The entirety of this video would not have been possible had it not been for the bot that I was able to use. All of the different images and character abilities coming in were a credit to that bot. And go in Discord, type up ability, boom, I have all of that there. And if you're interested in using something like that, you can join IVS. Hop over to that Discord link. We've got 20 guilds now, 600 plus members, and honestly, just a fantastic family. Anybody that knows the drama that I left from my previous alliance, I could not have gone to a more welcoming home. The group cares. The organization is fantastic. Everybody is willing to help out, and gives you another place to poke me if you have any questions. So, would love to see you in IVS. Now, talked about the Halloween event. I was given 2 letters. So, you can plug these letters into your anagram here and hopefully find out what it's supposed to be. But that is an X, and that is an I. Uppercase I. That is not an L. And I do want to give some special thanks. Snowprint made this possible with the giveaway and the contest, which was super fun. In a future video here very soon, I actually want to take a look at all the tier lists that you have submitted and finally give those long-awaited comments that I've been holding back on a lot of these tier lists. I've seen some great thoughts. I've seen some people that say, hey man, look, I don't have every character, but I still want to try my best. And, you know, like seeing their thought processes as a new character, a player, was super great to see. So everybody that participated despite feeling like you were in an uphill battle, thank you, right? And hopefully, like, just thinking about the process said, hey, you know what, like, why is this character good? Why do I value this character? Like, hopefully that gave a little bit of value too. But also at the same time, I do understand that maybe this contest wasn't the best opportunity for everybody. Sorry for the people that didn't know it was going on. One negative that I saw is that this gives an advantage to more experienced players because the idea is you want to match my tier list. Yes, intrinsically, there is some advantage for more experienced players, I admit. I did not let anybody that obviously worked on the list or had insight to the list participate. But, you know, intrinsic knowledge does gain benefit here. I will say that the idea is that, you know, you identify your discrepancies and you're able to level it up and hopefully learn more and ask questions. If anybody asks me a question about a character, I'll give you my honest thoughts, even if it's in the middle of a tier list contest. Now, I'm not going to say, yeah, he's strong tier, better than XYZ, right? Ask questions, learn the game. It's going to make you better. Now, a huge special thanks to the judges here that helped me pick the winners. Stefan, absolutely amazing. The tool that he created to help me find out the accuracy in Excel, like, I was going to do the same thing, but man, he was on top of it like flies on spoiled food, man. And got it before I could even think about it. Probes, always appreciate your input, man. 100% great to have you around. Ingvar, can't say enough good things about you. And then for the rest of my advisors who helped me come up with this list, your comments, greatly appreciated. Thank you guys so much for dealing with my content creation shenanigans. You're at here, Immortal Joe with a 3, 12er, CZVXX, Lays, and Revel. Thank you all so much for commenting. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry. That Discord channel got cluttered. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, a couple more things coming out here soon as we have the Fall of Cadia Campaign Elite, chapters 3 through 5 coming very shortly. We also are looking at doing the tier list review and going through everybody's comment or thoughts and hot takes and kind of giving my thoughts and feedback on them as well. The Imperial Tier List is done. That means the Xenos Tier List is next. So please, 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 feedback for this video. Obviously, aside from the obvious things like there wasn't a graphic for this. You had a random black screen. 100%, I know. Wanted to do this all in one tank, and by the time that I realized things were a little off, I was already 45 minutes in. I'm not going to start chopping and going, especially since I have a little bit of a deadline to make. Now, we have those 2 videos coming out. We are going to be doing some character spotlights like we've talked about in the future. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. I appreciate it. It is important. Hopefully, you've seen that I've taken some of it into consideration. No more cluttered room behind me. And, I appreciate it. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you enjoyed the tier list. I'm sure there'll be disagreements. I'm ready for them. Let's do it and take it easy.